Welcome to
Oh, that's.
Raising Those Spirits. I'm Steve,
I'm Sam.
and this would normally be Dad's Digress, but this is a off week. We normally do Dad's Digress on off weeks, but this is even more off because we're not doing a Dad's Digress this week. What happened, Sam?
Well, I guess if we're double off, that means we're extra on, which means you're getting a full episode this week. Since last week's ended up getting split into a two-parter. So what you're getting right now is the second part of our "Are You Afraid of the Dark" episode, where we're going to talk about some of our favorite episodes of "Are You Afraid of the Dark," and we're going to talk about the 2019 "Are You Afraid of the Dark" reboot.
Now, since it's a second half of an episode, it is full length, but we are not going to be talking about drinks or what's going on in the spooky world like we normally do, since it's technically a Dad's Digress week, but you will be getting a full content episode. So, I guess without any
So
further
lucky
delay,
you.
yeah, here is Are You Afraid of the Dark? Part 2. Okay, so we watched The Tale of the Doll Maker. Season 3, Episode 5, which was not my favorite episode growing up, but it was the one that really got to my wife, and she actually hadn't watched it since it aired back in 1992 or 3. So, of course, we watched it. But I did remember being creeped out by it as a kid. So it wasn't like I was like, oh, I don't even remember that one. I do remember viscerally there was actually a scene that I remembered. And so I was like, yeah, sure. So this one is about a little girl who goes to visit her aunt and uncle all the time, and there's this other family next door, and their daughter is her age, and they become best friends. They always hang out whenever she's visiting on like long weekends or whatever. And she shows up, and it's pre-Facebook, pre-internet. These kids don't keep in touch at all unless they're physically seeing each other. And it
Mm.
turns out the next door neighbors have moved. And over the course of the story, it eventually comes out the adults finally tell her that her friend disappeared, and that's why the parents moved. But they still own the house in case she ever comes back. So, I'll start from the beginning and kind of go through my thoughts on it. It starts off with her finding out her friend's not around, and her aunt and uncle are like, "That's fine, we're going to bingo." And she's like, "Ugh, so fun." And I was like, hold up. I remember bingo being fun when I was in like fifth or fourth to sixth grade. Bingo was not lame yet.
No, that's true.
I was like, what is this attitude? What's wrong with bingo? Bingo is fun if you're a kid. What else are you doing? So, but then she immediately won me over because her uncle was like, I gotta work on the septic tank. You want to come help? And she was like, no. And nobody wants to work on the septic tank, Hank. I grew up with
Oh,
plumbers. I can confirm this. So she kind of won me back. But so she immediately goes next door and just walks into her neighbor's house. And I'm like, I go into full parent mode where I'm like, why is this door unlocked? It's like a four-story like mansion in Oregon or something. You know what I mean? Like, why you moved, but you just didn't lock the doors? And the house is also still full of all their things. Like, the coats are still in the closet, Sam. All their furniture.
okay.
There's a full-size
So they
harp.
just straight up bailed. They just were like,
They
okay, we're out.
just bailed. And, like, there's a full-size harp. Those things are thousands of dollars.
Also
And
hard to move though. I can't blame them for leaving the harp.
for the harp, no, but like the coat closet, but in the coat closet behind the coats, she finds a secret staircase that goes up to the attic. And I'm like, didn't you used to hang out here all the time? And
She's
in
getting
the
pretty deep into this house.
she goes all the way through the house and goes through the secret staircase and finds a dollhouse in the attic. And eventually, she figures out that her friend got sucked into the dollhouse and has been turned into a living doll. And she
Oh
eventually
no.
gets sucked into the house and starts to turn into a doll and has to figure it all out. And they have that moment where she hears a noise, and it's clearly her friend in the house trying to call to her, and she's like, it's probably just a mouse. And it is never just a mouse. In every single one of these old things, they're like, it's probably just a mouse. And it has never once been a mouse.
Well,
Never
it's like it's like in every movie when something jumps out at you and it's always a cat.
It's always a cat. But there is no mouse. Like, she doesn't see a mouse and be like, it must have been that mouse. She sees a mouse trap and is like, it's mice. So anyway, I had all those questions where, being an adult, I want to go back to this, where I was like, where are the adults? Turns out her aunt is the caretaker for this house, and that's why, like, literally every single one of my where are the adults questions got answered, which I really appreciated. I will say, acting-wise, the aunt has 1,000-yard stare down. Like, that should just be her entire resume. Her sizzle reel is just her giving 1,000-yard stares. The parents of the missing girl moved away, but they won't sell the house in case she comes back. I'm like, but you won't be there if she comes back. It's just going to be a boarded up, abandoned house. This one is not written as well as Dead Man's Float, which, as you just said, was written poorly.
Oh yeah, no, I mean there's holes.
So,
there's holes.
Also, her aunt and uncle live in a pretty big house, and they have a fight in the hallway, literally right next to the couch where she is sleeping, like feet away from her, about how they have to tell her the truth, and about how the missing girl's parents said it was the house that took her. She didn't go missing. And I'm like, you live in a very large house. Why are you having this argument literally 5 feet from the sleepy child? Also, you have a very large house. Why is the sleeping child on a couch?
You would think they would want the kid's friends to know that she had gone missing. So it's like, she ever said anything to you? Is there anywhere like you guys would go hide? Like,
right?
Your kids' friends are a great source of information about your kids if they go missing.
Nope, like, not here.
Well, that is bad police work. First off,
yeah, they didn't even want to tell her. They just said that they moved for a while. So to get into the dollhouse in the attic, there's like a door in the wall that just leads to like a 4-story plummet. But when she opens it, she can see it into the dollhouse. And she goes to go through it, and her uncle like tackles her because he thinks she's like walking off into oblivion. But I was like, why couldn't he see that? She could see that. The other girl could clearly see that. The other girl's parents clearly knew that something about the house had taken her. It's just this uncle that can't see that this is clearly a portal to like a little demi-dimension. And again, I'm like, you are the only character that can't see this. It's bad writing. She also has like the good idea to tie twine on the outside and like walk with it in so she can find her path back. But she ties it literally to the doorknob so the door shuts behind her as soon as any tension hits it.
So again, you gotta remember, the premise of the show is that there are children telling other children a scary story.
Yes. It was just like, kid, there's like a support beam right there. Okay, yeah, tie it to the doorknob.
Tie it to the doorknob. No, that makes sense. Good work, kid.
Also, it's that frustrating trope where everyone goes into the room with the dollhouse and is like, ooh, look at that dollhouse. But no one ever actually looks at that dollhouse. Like, no one once looks through a window at the little people waving to them. Or, like, it's a giant, tiny scale of this house. No one looks at it. No one opens it. They're just like, oh, that's neat. And just keeps walking. I will say, it is much less creepy this time around. Which, again, could be due to the HD SD flat screen curved screen issue.
But what about the atmosphere of the episode? Like, does the episode have enough atmosphere? Like,
it does.
What does it have? Does it have anything going for it?
So,
spooky wise,
there were 3 in my mind types of episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark? There was spooky, there was creepy, and then there was mystery. And this one fell pretty solidly into the mystery category.
Mm.
It didn't have like a huge spooky atmosphere. It had a spooky mystery that she was trying to solve. But once they start turning into dolls, that's where it gets like it is basically children's first introduction to body horror.
Hmm. Oh,
Um,
sure, because you're slowly turning into a doll.
yeah, her friend is already really far gone. So at one point she was just like, "We need to get to the attic. The attic's where the portal is." But there's a giant bookcase. I can't move it by myself. You need to help me. And her friend just literally grabs her arm and pulls it off.
Oh.
Like she just grabs like her wrist and pulls it out of the sleeve, and it's just this porcelain thing. And like I remember, and my wife, that's like what killed her as a kid. I was like, I viscerally felt that as like a 10-year-old. It was, and again, I think it was my first introduction to body horror. But I think that the main character girl agreed because she immediately rips that thing off the wall that she needed help for. So I think she's also like, oh hell no, and just got like
I'm
fuck
out.
that strength and ripped it away from the wall, which was possibly my favorite part of the episode. So she goes, she gets her friend, they get out. She's been gone for about 45 minutes. Her aunt and uncle gave up real quick. She's been missing for 45 minutes, and they're like, she's gone. She's gone just like her friend was. We'll never see her again. I'm like, it's been 40. She could have just gone for a walk. She could be
Sure.
taking a nap. It's been. You guys just really gave up quick.
God, these parents. So yeah, I think that's so that I bet you if we watch more episodes, would become very apparent how bad the parents are in these episodes.
Oh,
'Cause
yeah.
there has to be so much that the parents are not doing to get to a situation where your kid is, sucked into a dollhouse.
I'm interested once we eventually get to the Goosebumps books and series
Mm,
if it's the exact same thing. Because in my memory, I remember a lot of the parents being useless. I feel like the underlying theme of Goosebumps was just adults are useless.
no, that's probably true. I'm sure R.L. Stein was making a point there.
So, then we get to my next annoyance of the episode, just as like I don't think I ever questioned it as a kid, but as an adult, you're like, wait, what? So her and her friend walk out, and they're both human again, but her friend is still wearing the doll clothing, like the clearly
Oh.
doll clothing, and I'm like, where did your clothes go? You're not porcelain anymore. Why is your outfit that you didn't wear that in there? Where are your clothes? Where did those come from?
Do you know that they didn't wear that in there? Maybe that's just the clothes they wear. They are
No,
living in
this
a
is like a big Victorian doll outfit.
oh,
Like
oh, that's uncomfortable.
made
That
of
makes
like
me uncomfortable somehow.
made of like uncomfortable looking satin. No child would willingly wear this.
Oh, it's unfortunate.
Yeah. So, yeah, my biggest problem was that visceral moment of the body horror wasn't being as good because back in the day, like it really looked like porcelain, not paint. But here it's just stage makeup. They just put white paint on these kids like arms and smeared it in a little bit and it looks so fake. But again, I think if it was SD, it might look like porcelain.
Mm.
So that's my thought on Tale of the Dollmaker. It was cemented in my brain. The girl pulling her arm off to this day was something I still think of, but it didn't quite hold up upon an adult viewing like Tale of the Dead Man's Float did. Well, I mean, Tale of the Dead Man's Float, I was still like, this is still pretty solid. And this one, I was like, I'm not saying I watched it. I still want to pop on another episode, but definitely, I'm interested to show this to my son when he's older to see
Mm.
if he's like, that's paint. Like,
Oh, sure, because they're not. Our kids are going to grow up in a world where everything looks so much more real.
yes.
So, like, they're going to look at this the same way we would have watched something from like the 1970s and gone, well, this looks chintzy and fake.
Yes.
It's just not going to hold up for them. I don't think that it will. I think one day when we sit down with our kids and we watch these Are You Afraid of the Dark together, it's not going to hold up.
Agreed. What did you watch?
I watched an episode that stuck out to me, which was the episode that I watched is The Tale of the 13th Floor, which is from season 2. It's season 2, episode 4. And this is about a little girl and a little boy. I say little girl and a little boy. They're probably teenagers, but everybody just looks like little kids to me now. They're a brother and sister. The sister is adopted, and they live on the 12th floor of an apartment building. But they like to go play around on the 13th floor, which is just like this big empty loft. And who shows up in the loft, big empty loft one day, is a new toy company, and they want to get these kids' opinions on the toys that they're making. But oh, turns out not really a toy company. Of course not. No, it's aliens. And they are coming to take the little girl. Her name was Karen. They're coming to take Karen away from Earth to the alien homeworld. And spoiler alerts for something from 20 some odd years ago. The big twist at the end of the episode, which is incredibly obvious through the whole episode, and I think that I hope it was obvious to me when I was a little kid. Karen is actually an alien. She was adopted because she was accidentally left on Earth, and they can only come back to Earth about once every 10 years. So this is them trying to persuade her basically to come on their alien spaceship and come back to the alien homeworld with them. Now, I take a lot of this episode is one of the ones that really stood out to me as a kid, but I take a lot of issues with it now as an adult. And just like plotting wise. Steve, do you remember this episode? Did you ever watch this one?
I did. I liked this episode. I forgot the twist. I remembered it as soon as you said it. But I did remember liking this episode. There were an alarming amount of Aliens episodes for Are You Afraid of the Dark? But yeah. I think this was my favorite of them. I don't normally love the It's Aliens episodes, which I think I talked about back during the Aliens episode that we did. But I did really enjoy 13th Floor.
So the moment of the episode that stuck with me, the reason that I think I will always remember it is the end of the episode. Brother and sister are watching a TV broadcast, and it turns out to the aliens, and they're explaining what they were really trying to do. And it pans over to the brother, who is played by Aaron Ashmore, who I think was on Veronica Mars and a bunch of other shows back here, late 90s, early 2000s. And he's like, what's going on? What are they talking about? And then it pans back over to Karen, and Karen now has an alien face. And the alien face is not an actual face. It's like the aliens have no faces. They're just sort of these no-face, white, splotchy-looking alien monsters. And that moment was so jarring and terrifying for me as a kid that it stuck with me. Watching it again, I would say that alien makeup is actually good. It's very minimalist. There's no, it's a no-face alien, but it looks so alien and weird. And I looked up the the special effects makeup artist. I'm gonna pull up his information right now. Is Arden Morat? I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Arden Morat, who went on to actually work on a lot of stuff. He did the new Pet Cemetery. He did a bunch of the more recent X-Men movies. So really, this guy who eventually would get Oscar nominations for all sorts of Star Awards. He did a lot of Are You Afraid of the Dark? And those makeups really hold up. So I think it really talks to the quality of what they were doing at the time. That makeup was scary. That reveal was scary. Yeah, the episode itself is not good. It is not good. The whole thing is the aliens are trying to convince this girl to go back to the alien homeworld with them, but they never explain to her what they're doing until it's too late. And they're not doing a really good job of tricking her either. Like they're being very obvious with what they're doing. She gets clued into the fact that these are aliens very quickly. I just wanted to be like, no, why don't you tell her why you're doing this? You're her parents, you're her alien parents. That's who's coming to looking for her. You need to talk to your kid. I recognize that like this is an awkward situation because you apparently accidentally left her here on Earth 10 years ago and she got adopted by a human family. But you need to talk to your kid to explain to them what you're doing. She does not understand what's happening here, and you are doing absolutely nothing to comfort her in this very, very strange situation. And you should recognize that this situation is strange. So I got very, very mad at this episode for
As a parent.
as a parent. It's just like it did very little. Her alien parents did very little to try and like explain to her what's going on. And like that's terrible parenting. Also, you accidentally have left her on an alien planet for 10 years. Again, terrible parenting.
And we're probably like, it's fine. Someone will probably adopt her.
Apparently, and she's very happy.
That won't be a conflict in 10 years.
Well, and it's like you come back to her and be like, we're your parents. It wasn't our choice to put you up for adoption, but situation at the time necessitated that we do. If you want to be part of our lives, we want to give you that option. Come to her and talk to her. Don't just be like, no, we're going to take you away from the family that you know. That's awful. And I'm putting a lot of emotion into this because it's really just like a spooky "Are You Afraid of the Dark" episode. But I just got mad at them. I was like, you need to talk to your kid. You can't just come in and try and dictate what they do now after 10 years of not being in her life. That is responsible. And I am not surprised she's rejecting you. Also, your toy factory is ridiculous. You don't know what you're doing. You are terrible. This is a terrible invasion. You are dumb aliens. You are very bad at this. But overall, for that one big reveal at the end of the episode, I thought that makeup effect was fantastic, and good for this guy for going on to being an Oscar nominee.
I think that was the show's big thing. Like, look at it. Like, you had that one big reveal with the face, and that was like the moment. For me, it was the girl pulling her arm off was that moment that stuck with me. It's just like, even Dead Man's Float, when they finally make it appear, because it's an invisible force for a while, and when you finally see it, you've got that like, oh man moment. Almost in these episodes seem to have banked on like that one big punch.
You're banking on that moment.
Yeah. Like that moment that's going to stick with kids, and they're going to talk about the next day. That they're going to think about the next week and tune back into the next episode.
Did you see the movie It Follows?
I hated It Follows. I know you love it. I know a lot of people love it. It is a very popular movie. My wife and I hated it.
Okay. Well, aside from your opinions of it, I feel like the end of It Follows, spoilers now for a more recent movie, drew a lot from this episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark? To the point that I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's the end of It Follows is directly inspired by this episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Interesting.
If the writers and directors of It Follows want to fight me on that, I will fight them on it.
They might not have intentionally did it, but they watched this episode growing up and it stuck with them.
Invite them on this show to fight with me on it. Please come on my show.
We're within 7 steps.
Sure. I would have to actually go. I'd have to do a little more research. This is no Tommy Wiseau, and I don't know my direct connection to the people from It Follows.
Well, that's because we don't know. I don't know who did It Follows. No,
and I'm not going to look it up. I've spent enough time on Google this episode.
Totally.
If they want to come on this episode, and if they want to come on our show and fight me about it, they can fight me about it. I'm not going to say ripped off. Obviously It Follows is much higher quality than this episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark, but the end of It Follows, I'm going to go ahead and call it a direct homage to this episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark. It's a direct homage to Dead Man Float.
Okay.
So with that, let's move. I think this is a good opportunity to move on to
The new episode?
um, the new show, the reboot, the 2019 reboot.
Oh man. I
I have a lot of opinions on this.
You have a lot of opinions on this?
Oh, I said you have a lot of
I
opinions on it.
do. Well, did you
I've been
like it?
avoiding talking to you about it.
Yeah,
Did I like it?
being at the zoo was really
Being
hard with
together in
you.
person and
Being
not being able to talk
I
about
just
this.
wanted to talk about this. I just wanted to talk about this so badly. So, give me your opinion on it.
My opinion. Okay, so it's obviously it's the 2019 reboot again. It focuses on the Midnight Society as opposed to the stories that are being told. So in this first 45-minute episode, they do have a brief section where it is the main character telling a story to the Midnight Society so that she can get inducted into the Midnight Society. And I was like, okay. But for the most part, it's actually dealing with them in their everyday lives. And I was just like, well, that's not really what I'm here for. I came here for an anthology series where I can get told a one spooky story and that's it. And I was like, well, this is clearly just trying to get me to get this streaming service so I can find out what happens in the rest of these episodes. And I'm like, that's just not Are You Afraid of the Dark to me. Like it felt like it could have been any other kind of spooky kid show. You know, this felt like it was trying to be the chilling adventures of Sabrina, but for a younger audience. Yeah, I wasn't super there for it. At the same time, like the production value was there. It was definitely spooky. I think I would have appreciated more if it wasn't branded as Are You Afraid of the Dark. So that's how I felt coming out of that first episode. How'd you feel?
I do I understand what you're saying, and I had a lot of thoughts about that as well. Something to note is that they don't have big anthology, like 20 episode seasons anymore. They have story arcs. So this is a 3 episode arc, and it's followed up by like a 5 or a 6 episode arc.
Okay.
So they have format shifted. Speaking of you said quality. This is really nice quality. This is like Netflix quality. This is not the Nick quality of our childhood.
No, the production value on this was much higher than those old episodes.
And the acting is much better. These are decent child actors. Especially comparatively to old Are You Afraid of the Dark? So, well, the first formatting change immediately is instead of a 30-minute episode, it is 1 hour. And instead of opening with the Midnight Society, you open with a horror snippet of a girl in like a Freddy Krueger kind of situation where she's being haunted in her nightmares.
Yeah, she's having like a bad dream. It was a Freddy Krueger situation.
And for that was a great opening. It was a really fun use of lighting and camera. They built atmosphere very well, I thought. I think they immediately were just like, you were in it, you understood the atmosphere, it was good. So I really appreciated that. Then you get to the opening, and again, we loved the original series opening. This, I liked it. It is very reminiscent of the original opening, while still being its own thing. Like, they understood the source material. So, it has a really good spooky feel off the bat with that dream and stuff, and then it falls quickly back into the awkward childhood that is Are You Afraid of the Dark? Like, you immediately end up in that, like, mom campiness, which is, like...
That's a good way of describing it.
A little cringy, but, like, that's to a degree Are You Afraid of the Dark? And, like, that's one of the things I liked about it, is they did do that hard format change where, like, you didn't start with the Midnight Society or anything. But they are hitting, like, the creepy and the campy beats of the old one. They didn't just go super serious. It's not like it's like Riverdale where it's like, this isn't your mom's Archie. It's like, this is your mom's Are You Afraid of the Dark? It's just we've changed up the format a bit, but we've still got like the spirit of that. To me anyway. So eventually she starts to like meet some people at her new school, and the Midnight Society contacts her, and they want to do an introduction and have her tell a story to see if she can be the newest member of the Midnight Society. So now we're at the Midnight Society part. We're getting to meet them. This is kind of your introduction to the Midnight Society. And I was like, okay, that's cool. Maybe they'll get to like an anthology after this. The first episode is just like literally world building, which, was weird, but I was willing to follow this thread. It was at that point good enough because I had notes already where I was like, "Where's the Midnight Society?" I don't know if I like that there's no Midnight Society, and I was like, "Oh, I wonder if this is building up." And then like after this, we'll do it. So she tells her story, and the story she picks is the nightmare she was having at the beginning, but you get a lot more backstory and detail and context to what was happening to her. I'm putting a pause on that, and I'm going to be a dad for about 5 minutes.
Okay, go be a dad.
So she has to meet them in the woods at like midnight with a map of like landmarks. First of all, she moved to town like 48 hours ago. It is pitch black, and you're making her go through the woods with landmarks. This is just a good way to get a kid to die of exposure in Oregon in the fall.
Oh, sure.
It is cold and wet in Oregon in the fall. Then they all sneak up on her and surround her with torches. And I'm like, kids just should not have torches in the woods. Just like flat out, open flame, dripping fire torches. I know I said it was damp, but I don't know if it's that damp. It's not a rainforest. Kids shouldn't be running around the deep forest in the middle of the night with like 10 exposed torches. And cloaks and, all that fun stuff. It's just a fire hazard. They use, so the dust bag that they throw the dust onto the fire and make it go up in the old and the new series, they used the same leather bag. I don't know if you noticed. It was the same dust bag, and I want that dust bag. It looks so cool. I immediately recognized it, because we actually watched this first, so I hadn't seen Are You Afraid of the Dark in, like, decades. And I was like, holy shit, that's the bag, and I did confirm that when I went back and watched the things. And it's just this really awesome-looking, like, leather satchel that they pull it out of. And I just thought it was a nice nod to the original series that they were... Like, the bag was almost like a character. Like, it was the only main prop of the original series. And it was just cool that they pulled it out. Like, the Midnight Society still has it. So then she starts telling her story. We're back into... I'm out of dad mode now. She starts telling her story, and I immediately do not love this part of the new format, where... she's telling the story, and then it jumps back to the fire, and they talk. And then she's telling the story, although that did happen in the Dollhouse episode I watched. So it's not a complete detraction, but I hated it, and they did it a lot more in this one.
It was bad in this.
Yeah, because like they build the thing is, I didn't mind it as much in the old one, because the atmosphere wasn't like nearly as present in the old ones, but they do such a good job building atmosphere and lighting and camera and that, so when they jump back, you are ripped out like viciously. So that I did not like, and I agree.
Yeah, that was not great.
It's just they do a really good job on immersion, and it just breaks the immersion, and they do it like 4 or 5 times. And I'm like, I just want to... Once you're in the story for story time, you should be in the story for story time.
For story time.
And the child actor that they got for the story, I thought she was very good. The little girl.
Mm-hmm.
I thought she was very expressive. And just, I'm just impressed with the acting that they did for this, because they didn't have to. You know what I mean?
It was better than it needed to be. It was better than it had to be, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a really good first episode. I'm hooked. Our friend John does not have this. So we are actually thinking of getting Paramount Plus to finish, because the first episode is free on YouTube. I highly recommend you go check it out. But if you want to finish this, you gotta get it.
You need Paramount Plus.
So I am considering getting Paramount Plus. I mean, honestly, I could just do the free week and knock out the next 2 episodes, and I'm considering it.
Yeah, I mean, Well, then there's I think 6 episodes of season 2.
Yeah, but who knows if I even like season 2. After that, I can watch that on YouTube and make the decision again.
Oh, that's true.
Um,
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was strong. It didn't feel like Are You Afraid of the Dark to me because of the way that it did not. It did just didn't properly utilize that anthology format, which is what I was really looking for. Um, yeah, the story, like the her telling the story to the Midnight Society, it felt like was rushed. They kept cutting back out of it. It's like this is not really the focus of what they're doing here.
yes,
So it's yeah, yeah. I didn't.
I want the story to be the focus.
Yeah,
I don't mind you putting in all this peripheral forming of the Midnight Society, learning about the different people in the society. Okay, but once we're in the story, we are in the story.
right. If you have an hour and we're moving to an hour format, yeah, give me 15 minutes of world building and then give me 45 minutes of our story. I didn't watch Mystery Science Theater for the host segments. I watched it for the meat of it.
Yeah.
At the
No,
same
that's a
time, like
perfect analogy.
at the same time, like I recognize that like this is they're doing something very different. But in my estimation, when you're rebooting something, you need to know why you're rebooting something. And if you're going to reboot Are You Afraid of the Dark, why aren't you going to make, we're doing Are You Afraid of the Dark, but we're telling the story of the people telling the stories. I'm like, but then,
Does
or at least put like a subtitle under it, like Are You Afraid of the Dark? Tales of the Midnight Society. Call it something like that. So I'm not expecting it to be Are You Afraid of the Dark? At the
well,
same time, 20 years out, I'm not the core audience. I'm not who they're not selling this show to me. So what do I know?
now that you know about the second series where they did
Mm.
have to do Midnight Society stuff, does that make it less of a large detachment since they've technically explored this concept before? You just weren't
I
aware of it.
guess. I mean, again, that was yeah. I guess that's that was after the time that I was watching it. When you reboot something, I believe that you can take. There's not a reason to not try something. There's always people got up in arms about the all-female reboot of Ghostbusters. It's like no, well, it's like if you understand why you're trying to reboot Ghostbusters and you're changing this one fundamental aspect of it, but you know why you're changing it, and you still have a good story to tell, that's perfectly fine. Are You Afraid of the Dark? It's just like we're rebooting it, but we're not focusing on the story. We're focusing on the storytellers. If you've got a good story to tell in that format, good. Don't begrudge them. It's just it wasn't what I was looking for.
All right.
Maybe I need to open my mind a little bit more and be more receptive to the changes that they made. Because if everything else is still good, then shouldn't I get over it?
Without giving spoilers, I will say there is a twist at the end of the first episode. How did you feel about the twist? And do you feel like that could make it so this whole thing is actually the anthology and there's technically almost to a degree no Midnight Society?
Wait, what? Say that again.
So there was a large twist at the end that
Hmm.
to a degree swapped everything. So instead of it being a story about the Midnight Society, it turns out you've been in the story the whole time. So at
Oh,
this pace, you can almost look at it like they've gotten rid of the Midnight Society and the story is about the Midnight Society.
hmm. Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah, yeah, it was an interesting. It was an interesting twist of the way that
Like,
they are
yeah,
shifting the focus.
if you flip the narrative there, then like it's almost all story time story. And there was
Because
just
it's yeah, because the story is spilling out into the world.
yes. And if you don't want to get to Paramount Plus, I think this could technically, the ending of this episode can technically count as an ending. Now, it's a 3-story arc, but I think it would be totally on brand with old Are You Afraid of the Dark to just have ended where it ended. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, I get what you mean. Just like end on that sort of like, ooh, we don't really
Ooh.
know what's happening cliffhanger.
Oh no, like everything is the opposite of what you thought it was. That is a
Oh,
classic
that's a
type
good
of
point.
ending. So if you only saw this episode, that could just be an intact episode. You don't even need to watch the other two episodes. Just a thought. Again, I'm not married to it, but I think it has a lot of promise, and I'm very cautiously optimistic. I really liked a lot of the first one. It wasn't perfect. I mean, I'd say it's like an
Hmm.
8 out of 10. But
I mean, that's a high score.
I mean, honestly, I'm looking at IMDb and it's got an 8 out of 10. So I feel like
Oh, all right.
I didn't even look at that when I said it and then I looked to be like, I wonder what IMDb thinks. So it's an 8 out of 10. Me and IMDb. I'm willing to stick with it. I thought that it captured enough of the old soul while putting its own new spin. There are a few other shows out that are anthology shows,
Hmm.
like Are You Afraid of the Dark, that I would like to jump into with you and see if there's
Oh
like
yeah.
maybe they didn't do that because there was already two or three other shows doing that. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Oh yeah. No, I mean, I would check out other shows.
There are definitely a few that Netflix always throws at me that are aimed at like middle school, tween, Are You Afraid of the Dark age kids that I mean, they look really good, and like Netflix makes a few of them. So the production's there, but if they're already doing that, how many shows like that are you going to watch?
All right. Yeah, I mean, let's check out more stuff.
Yeah.
There will always be more content for our podcast.
Watch the first episode on YouTube, people. It's free, baby.
It's free. It's free on YouTube. You should check out the first episode of the current iteration of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Although this was season one, they're going into season three now.
Yes.
So we're a little behind the times.
We're a
That's
little
okay though.
behind.
For
Season
dads, we don't have time for these things.
As we said earlier, there are two episodes up. The first episode of season one, first episode of season two. The episode we watched was called Part One, Submitted for Approval.
Ooh, makes sense. It's like the beginning of the episodes.
Yeah. All right.
All
Um,
right, this was an incredibly long one.
this was. Hold on. We never did parent time. We didn't do adult time.
Oh, okay. Adult time. What are you doing in your? No, how do we segue into it?
What have you been doing in your adult time? I have been
Mm-hmm.
listening to a new podcast that was recommended to me when I was listening to Station Blue because they were given those cool stingers at the end of each episode where they recommend a different spooky podcast.
Mm-hmm.
As I wait for the next season of Station Blue, I have been listening to Lake Clarity.
Oh, Lake Clarity. I listened to Lake
Yes,
Clarity.
I am in the middle of season two, which is different from season one. I really enjoy it. Season one is like a cabin in the woods style camping trip gone wrong, found footage style, but with audio only that I really enjoyed. And part two is about a cub reporter who is investigating the mysterious disappearances and murders of the kids from season one. It's very good. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. The acting is B list, but it adds like a fun.
It's charming though.
Yeah,
It's charming.
yes, absolutely. Initially, in the first episode, I was like, I'm not sure about this. But by the end of the episode, I was like, no, I love this. This has just B movie charm.
Yeah, the way I would describe Lake Clarity, because I listened to it a couple of years ago, is we're still at the beginning of podcasting as a format, like a format that's really getting utilized, which means we are now getting our first iterations of people who are just like trying to cut their chops storytelling and producing on podcasts. And I think Lake Clarity falls into that, like people who are learning how to podcast, making a podcast. And it really, you know, say what you will about the quality, but there's a lot of charm to it because there's a lot of care put into it.
I agree. It is very well done. And it's just fun and it's a good story and Honestly, I wanted more of season one. It went too fast for me, which is the opposite of most things.
Yeah,
Usually, I'm
no,
like,
I
you could cut an episode or two of that easily, streamline it down. But this, I was like, I could have used more.
so for my adult time, I'm gonna plug Ouija Broads, which is a podcast I got real into in the last year. It's two women from the Pacific Northwest who are telling weird stories about the Pacific Northwest, which is a place I've never been to, and I really do love a podcast that can bring me to a new location that I have not had the chance to visit. Um, so it's weird, it's spooky, it's strange. It's all about Washington, Oregon, Alaska area. It's they tell a lot of cool, weird stories. It's really well researched, and stories well told. So definitely recommend checking out Ouija Broads if that's your bag.
Awesome. I should also mention I was out. I took my son to the aquarium and I found a store selling a spooky New England book, like ghost stories, folklore, legends of like the colonial England area. So I'm very excited to read that because as someone from New
Mm.
Jersey, I know all the New Jersey lore, but I do not know the like Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts spooky lore. So I'm excited to get into that and kind of learn a little bit more about the areas. All right,
But
cool.
with that, yeah, with that, let's let our audience go back to their daily lives. You can find Raising Those Spirits. We're on Facebook. We are on Instagram. We are on Twitter. So always feel free to shoot us a message. We'd love to hear from you.
Excellent. And yeah, don't forget to sound off. If you know anything cool about keys, if you've been doing anything spooky and fun that you want to share, we would love to hear your ideas and your projects. So until next
Tell us what to
week,
do.
I'm
Yeah,
Steve,
I'm Sam.
and thanks for
We
listening.
still don't have we still don't have a sign off.
We never will. Goodbye.